Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and I want to talk about the board game Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid, and the version that I am playing on close to a weekly basis right now. I'm going into my third session with this game, and I've played multiple games within each. So I've played multiple games. Some sessions will have more than one game. But we played with Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid. We've played with the Shattered Grid expansion. We've played with the Multiple Tommies expansion. And we have played with one other expansion, which is the In-Space. Mostly it's the In-Space expansion. The expansion that specifically aligns with the In-Space series. So this board game came out from Renegade Games, and I think it's every dungeon master should look at what this game is doing and should strive to play it. You should not buy it, and the reason why is I'm incredibly fortunate that the set that I'm playing with has close to $300 worth of content, right? So the board game I'm playing is not even the full board game, but it's the best of the board games. It is. So the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers board game, this is truly incredible. Renegade Games has done something I've never really seen before, and this is what I think they've done. So Gary Gygax came in 1974 and kind of codwalloped the war game industry. He was like, he looked at the war game industry very closely. He spent a lot of time specifically playing Gettysburg by Avalon Hill. So he was playing Avalon Hill's Gettysburg, right? And he got really into wargaming, and he looked at wargaming, and he saw the shape of wargaming, right? And he's like, oh my gosh, I can make this change, and then I can create this new type of game. And he called it tabletop role-playing game, and he named it Dungeons and Dragons, and he brought it to the world, and he absolutely dominated the space, and there was an explosion, right, of acceptance, right? I think that Renegade Games, who specifically understand tabletop role-playing games, I think they're doing something tricky. I think they are tricking board gamers into a tabletop role-playing experience, right? And so basically what they did was I think the people at Renegade Games figured something out with this game that is really unique. And I think that Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid is doing every single thing that Dungeons and Dragons needs to do. And that is, it has to make combat run in 15-minute blocks for an entire combat. So in 15 minutes, with Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, you can set up a combat that has multiple locations and multiple monster types. So you can have putties, which are regular monsters, super putties, which are advanced monsters, and then the Psycho Rangers, which are boss monsters, and then Rita Repulsa, which is a mega monster, right? And they can put 2 putties down, 3 super putties down, 1 Psycho Ranger down, and 1 Rita Repulsa, and 1 Psycho Ranger, right? The boss won't come in until the very end, right? So Rita Repulsa will be supported by maybe a Psycho Ranger and some super putties, right? But the reality is, every 15 minutes, this game is setting down 2 to 8 different types of monsters onto the board and allowing the player characters, the players, it's a cooperative game, by the way, board game, to defeat those creatures with high complexity in what they can do with their combat. And they're rolling dice, right? So there's yay boo, there's like, oh my gosh, I hit and there's high fivers around the board, right? And so I think what Renegade Games did is they did a reverse Gary, right? They're like, oh, we can take everything that's been happening in tabletop role-playing games for 50 years, we can hide it and we can sell it to board gamers, right? And that's exactly what they did. And what's really interesting, the only problem, so one, there's so many incredible things that are happening with the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid game that I think every Dungeon Master has to see it, because it's doing every single thing we need to accomplish. And the biggest thing we need to accomplish in Dungeons & Dragons is we need to make it so that any fight in the game can complete in 15 minutes. And how do you do that? I can tell you right now, Renegade Games figured it out with Monsters of the with Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid, right? And these multiple expansions, right? So it is really a phenomenal game. The only thing that's interesting about, there's a couple bad things about it. It's outrageously expensive. It is outrageously expensive. So I think you have to play this game. You should go find a place to play it. That's not that hard for us, right? First of all, a lot of FLGSs nowadays have a store copy, right? So I have literally multiple places that I can go that have 50 to 100 games in their collection, right? So I'm very blessed. And now I have a good friend who has an amazing collection of this game. And get this, like he actually keeps all the cards perfectly, like in sleeves, right? And then he actually has all the boxes for the game, and then he keeps a card box. Like even the box he uses to protect the cards is like a $50 box. It's so literally when we play this, you're looking at $300 worth of content, and I don't think he even has half of what's available, right? So you could spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars on this game, but the design in it is every single thing that Dungeons & Dragons needs to accomplish. So I really think you definitely have to get yourself to see this, and then what we need to do is we should be taking every single lesson learned and stealing it back right into Dungeons & Dragons, and then use Dungeons & Dragons DMG page 4. The rules are in charge. You are to massively reduce the complexity and make the speed very, very high on Dungeons & Dragons. So you have got to see this game. Now, I will go on a little bit more and talk about exactly what this game is doing to allow these combats to run so quickly, right? So what they do is, so one of the things the game did that is brilliant is they have specific, they've actually supplied all the miniatures, perfect miniatures, right? And they have created a board that is there's the command center in the center, right? And then there are locations that go around the command center. And so when the miniatures are dispersed, they are literally dispersed to locations that are thematic to Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, right? So in D&D, I think what we would do is we would say, hey, there's a rally point, and then and then every location can be, okay, this is the Rocky Gorge, this is the center tree where everybody can retreat up into the branches and is safe, and then around the center tree is the Rocky Gorge, and then there is the Burning Wagon, and there is the the Spike Pit, right? There's a Spike Pit over there. And then fourth, the final location is that is an open field, or open ground, a rocky scrub, right? And so I think we could build quickly these different locations, a location with 4 different items within the location, and then allow the player characters to move quickly around them, right? And then what's happening is each of the miniatures is represented by a card, and the powers are on that card, right? The card comes out, and then the card and then the card comes out, and then the enemy creatures are taking action based on the powers they have on the cards, right? So that is occurring, and then the player characters have multiple cards. They have a deck of cards, and it shows their different powers, right? And it's very fast, it's very responsive, and very quick. And I think they've just done a tremendous job of really depicting player characters, depicting entities, and allowing them to fight each other extremely quickly. They even have, like, this is amazing, they literally even have a leveling mechanic in the game, but it is so fast, right? And it's really, and I do think it's really important for dungeon masters to be looking at this. And the reason why is, where have we been looking for ideas for to make our tabletop role-playing game run better? We've been looking for them in other tabletop role-playing games, which are fundamentally worse. Like, nothing out there is better than Dungeons & Dragons. They're literally less innovative and far less quality, right? Because they all have less money and less inspiration, like quite literally less inspiration, right? But to their credit, Renegade Games really did break out of the box. And what's interesting is, what's really fascinating to me is, when they found a better way to play tabletop role-playing games, they realized they couldn't sell it to tabletop role players, right? They had to sell it to board gamers, right? And they did, and they've done tremendously with it. But it is really incredibly fast, and my mind is really kind of thinking about how to take the lessons that Renegade Games did, boil D&D down further, make it tighter, make it faster, make it better, right? Using page 4, DMG rule, the rules aren't in charge, you are, right? To just make Dungeons & Dragons run much, much faster, so that we can attract people who are not pedantic academics, right? So I really appreciate you just let me kind of talk through this. I'm really kind of thinking a lot. This game is really in my head a lot, right? And I really think it's really interesting. Like, we essentially, Gary, like, just ran off with the coolest, most actionable items of wargaming and made it work. Oh, and here's another thing. Why didn't this game, if it's as great as I said, why didn't it explode? Well, in 1974, nobody had it. There was virtually no competition, right? Like, now we have an entire entertainment industry, video games, which are sucking all the oxygen out of the room. And we have 500 channels of streaming. And we have, the theaters are still going. And we have comic books, that some people are still reading. And we have audiobooks, right? So, like, so the reason this didn't explode the way what Gary did is nothing explodes. It's very hard for anything to punch through the top now, right? It's because there's so much competition for just attention and focus. Every single word of that is my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.